Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. I'm Tizengauzen. Today is August 28th and there are a lot of important news stories. In this episode, a massive strike on Kyiv, an entire residential building destroyed, and unfortunately, there are casualties and injured. What is this? Once again, it's a slap in the face to Washington and a demonstration of impunity from Putin. And the US is hitting India with tariffs, but continues to buy fuel made from Russian oil. How does this scheme work? Meanwhile, Europe is discussing secondary sanctions, but the main question is whether it is ready to impose these sanctions on its own. And what are the life-giving drones up to? Moscow is already being forced to buy gasoline from Belarus, and Hungary is taking revenge on a Ukrainian commander, and about how Azerbaijani President Aliyev is tearing apart the Kremlin's propaganda narrative. Meanwhile, in Russia itself, the cult of Putin is being shaped after the models of Lenin and Stalin. Lenin and Stalin, I'll show you a video that will make your blood run cold. All this and more in today's episode. If this is your first time on this channel, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. So, last night was a very loud one here in Kiev. Unfortunately, there are casualties, people wounded, and an entire residential building destroyed. Last night, Russia carried out a massive bombardment using cruise missiles, including ballistic missiles, aeroballistic kinzhal missiles, and attack drones. The main target of last night's strike was Kyiv. And just think about it. During the night, Russia used 20 Kak-101 cruise missiles, 2 kinzhal aeroballistic missiles, and 9 ballistic missiles, Iskander M, and almost 600 attack drones. Unfortunately, there are casualties and wounded. Practically no Russian strike goes by without this. At this moment, it is already known that at least 15 people have died, including 4 children, and 45 people have been injured. Unfortunately, as experience shows, since they are still clearing the rubble, these are not the final numbers. My condolences to all the families and loved ones who have lost someone, and to those who have been injured. I wish a speedy recovery. And the EU ambassador to Kiev, Katarina Maternova, stated that last night Russia carried out a targeted strike on a building located next to the European Union's representation in Ukraine. I'd like to ask, how is Donald Trump doing? How's his golf game going? And I'd also probably like to ask Steve Witkoff a question. This massive strike right after Steve Witkoff's statement that Putin really wants peace, he wants peace, don't you get it? Is this enough proof that Putin wants peace? What do you think? Or is it actually the case that things are a bit different? And let me remind you that next week was supposed to mark the end of Donald Trump's 50-day ultimatum, after which he promised to impose sanctions. But of course, he changed everything before that. By the way, Trump initially gave Putin 50 days to continue his offensive in Ukraine. Then, by the way, most likely because of the strikes on Ukrainian cities, the ultimatum was shortened to 10 days. But after those 10 days passed, nothing happened. In other words, Putin was given more time again. Putin probably hoped that with his summer-autumn offensive, he would be able to significantly change the situation at the front and capture new large territories of Ukraine. However, things turned out differently. Attempts by Russian troops to advance were firmly repelled by the armed forces of Ukraine. And a large number of occupiers were killed or taken prisoner. Absolutely. No results were achieved during those 50 days. I mean, no major results from the offensive. That is, I think this is obvious and clear to everyone. I also think that it is clear to everyone that, having not achieved tangible results on the front, Putin has resumed massive strikes on Ukrainian cities. Naturally, Kyiv became a demonstration of the resumption of these attacks. Well, I will remind you that Putin recently attacked the American enterprise Flex in Transcarpathia v. Mukachevo to an American enterprise. After that, Donald Trump said that he was not very pleased about it. In other words, if the goal was to demonstratively wipe his feet on Donald Trump's ultimatum and show him that all these ultimatums can be shoved somewhere far away, that's exactly what Putin did with this massive strike on Kyiv. What do you think Donald Trump will say in response to this? Let me guess. He'll say, I still need 2 more weeks to figure out whether Putin wants peace or not. And then we'll start acting differently. And then we'll use a different approach. some kind of approach towards Putin. I think that's probably how it will be. In other words, it's this endless cycle of threats in nature. Putin strikes Ukraine, strikes the cities. Trump says, oh, I'll show him, I'll give him 2 weeks and then I'll see. 2 weeks go by, nothing happens. Putin strikes again and again, over and over. This cycle of promises in nature is, of course, sad. In my opinion, Putin is doing everything he can to show Trump that he absolutely doesn't care about any ultimatums from the US. And by the way, it would be wrong to say that Donald Trump is doing nothing at all. Today, something rather important happened. In fact, the doubled tariffs against India, which buys Russian oil, have come into effect. So, if Trump had imposed a 25% tariff now starting today, this tariff is being raised to 50% specifically for the purchase of oil from the Russian Federation. But there's a very interesting nuance in the implementation of these tariffs. The tariffs affected goods from India such as clothing, jewelry, footwear, and furniture. However, an exception was made, attention, for fuel, pharmaceuticals, and metals. Here's an interesting point. Do you know why? Why was an exception made for fuel? Well, because the US, despite... Indeed, there are strict sanctions. There are a huge number of them, both personal and sectoral, as well as direct sanctions against the Russian Federation. So despite these strict sanctions, the US remains one of the largest buyers of petroleum products from India, petroleum products that are made from Russian oil. And not just the US. The European Union intends to, for the first time, try to impose secondary sanctions against Russia's partners, that is, those who buy Russian energy resources. This will be part of the 19th package of sanctions. This was reported by Bloomberg. And it's an absolutely correct measure. That's right, but this should have been done much earlier. Let me explain why. Direct sanctions were imposed against Russia by the European Union. That's 18 packages, including a price cap on Russian energy resources, on Russian oil. So what does Russia do? It creates a huge shadow fleet, which is used to circumvent these sanctions. Hundreds of tankers use various schemes to sell Russian oil without adhering to the price caps specified in the sanctions. At the same time, everyone is well aware of how Russia circumvents these sanctions and who ends up buying this Russian oil and petroleum products. Everyone also knows perfectly well that India and China together buy up almost 80% of all Russian oil. And by the way, the US understands this perfectly well too. That's exactly why the tariffs are aimed at those who buy Russian oil, because direct sanctions are essentially just a search for ways to get around them. And here an uncomfortable question arises. How is the European Union going to impose sanctions against itself? So who am I and why am I asking this question? Yes, because some of the primary and most significant buyers of petroleum products that are refined from Russian oil in India, for example, are indeed European countries, including the Netherlands, Italy, France, Greece, and also the United States. Here, I am not exclusively talking about Europe anymore. I am specifically talking about the United States. The US especially likes to buy diesel and jet fuel produced at Indian refineries. So I decided to take a look at who the biggest buyer is. I'll tell you in a moment, but for now let's put up a banner to remind you of an important point. So who are the top 10 buyers? Petroleum products made from Russian oil and processed at Indian plants, the Netherlands. That's one. About 10, almost 11 billion in exports. Singapore, well, the United Arab Emirates, they have their own story. They buy Russian oil for themselves and then sell their own oil. It's a clever move. They sell their own oil on the market. The United States of America currently purchases up to $5 billion worth of goods and services from India annually, as do several other prominent European nations, including Spain, France, Belgium, and the United Kingdom, and even the distant country of Australia. So, in this case, it's probably very appropriate to start by looking at ourselves first. By the way, the head of the US Treasury, Mr. Besant, criticized Europe and said, yes, how can this be? You reproach us, the United States, saying we do nothing, yet you yourselves are buying products derived from Russian oil. Stop doing that. I'm quoting him, I want to say that it's time for our European colleagues to either accept it or keep quiet. He responded harshly. They constantly say, oh yes, the US should do this, the US should do that. President Trump imposed secondary sanctions against India, but the Europeans did not. And he's right. According to him, EU countries are buying products from Indian refineries made from Russian oil. That's exactly what I just told you. Well, in general, you need to start with yourself first and foremost. As they say, either put on your underwear or take off your cross, or vice versa. That's the saying. By the way, friends, let me remind you that while our European partners are still figuring out how to impose these sanctions, and while Donald Trump is considering introducing tough sanctions, the front is being held solely thanks to the heroism of our soldiers. That's why I want to remind you that we regularly organize collections for various units. And what am I saying this for? A huge thank you to you, always. Together with you, we have completed a major fundraiser for 2 drones mall for our medics from the 1st Separate Medical Battalion. Soon, these unmanned evacuation vehicles for the wounded will be with them. They will definitely record a video and show how they work. But for this, I want to express my immense gratitude to you, both from myself and from our medics, our heroes. And now I'm announcing the next fundraiser. You know that we do this together on a regular basis. Today we are launching a new fundraiser for one of the largest brigades, the Separate Presidential Brigade named after Bogdan Khmelnytsky. They are currently engaged in fierce battles in the Donetsk and Luhansk directions. They recorded a special video for us. Take a look. The war continues to scorch our land. The Separate Presidential Brigade addresses Boris Tizengauzen and the viewers of his channel, with a request to provide our battalions with quad bikes to carry out mobile combat missions in the Pokrovsk direction. We are sure you fully understand what kind of hell is happening here right now. We all need to make every effort to preserve the independence of our country. Let's support our warriors, let's support this fundraiser. The link to the fundraiser is in the description of this video. The link to the fundraiser is in the comments. There is mono, there is private, and there is PayPal for those who want to help from abroad. And if by chance you're not watching on my channel, which happens, here is a QR code. It leads directly to the fundraiser account. And now let's talk about the very best sanctions against that Russian oil and petroleum products. After Ukrainian drones struck Russian oil refineries, Russia's processing capacity has already decreased by 17%. So soon, 1/5 of the capacity simply won't be used, and Russia is forced to look for additional sources of fuel supply. In other words, they want to cover the budget deficit. Guess who they want to get gasoline from? From Putin's friend, the potato dictator Lukashenko, Klubnelikov, as we call him, Papa Kolya, as we also call him. That's why Papa Kolya will definitely provide Putin with more gasoline and diesel, because otherwise Russian military equipment simply won't be able to move. And Moscow has already started buying Belarusian petroleum products, so in this regard I have a question. If 2 oil refineries, and I'm especially emphasizing the Mozyr refinery right now, in Belarus are supplying the occupier aggressor with fuel, is it possible at the very least, somewhere on the border between Belarus and Russia, for a train carrying these petroleum products for the Russian army, which is destroying Ukrainian cities? Can it become a legitimate target? I think it can. For now, I'm only talking about when it leaves the territory of Belarus. But this is a debatable issue even within Belarus itself, although Belarus is a country of partisans. The partisans there are experienced, as we know, so anything is possible. And could you have imagined that the gas station country would end up buying gasoline from Belarus? I mean, just look at how far things have gone. Russia. And just recently another important event took place. In the Ryazan region, there was a massive explosion on the main Ryazan-Moscow oil pipeline. This is one of the main sources supplying petroleum products to Moscow. So, if it isn't repaired in time, Moscow, all those hipsters at Patriarch's Ponds, at the Patriarchs who aren't interested in politics, will simply be left without gasoline. You see? So, in connection with these strikes, who do you think stood up for Putin? And not just stood up, but did so aggressively in a way we haven't seen before? Well, we know who it is. The pterodactyl of the world, Orban. So, Hungary is banning entry to the Ukrainian-Hungarian Robert Brovdi, better known by his call sign, Magyar. Who was it that talked about Nazism and oppression? Orban? And why didn't Orban say a word when Russia struck an American company in Zakarpattia with a missile? There could have been Hungarians there. He didn't say a word. You feel that, right? So why was Magyar banned? Because of the strikes on the Druzhba oil pipeline, without which Orban, he's dependent on that oil, he starts going through withdrawal. He just starts freaking out, twitching. It's like a real withdrawal, you know? Orban really needs to be put in some kind of oil rehab. So the commander of the unmanned systems forces, that very same Magyar, reported on the strikes against the Druzhba oil pipeline. And by the way, he also added to his report the slogan of the Hungarian resistance from 1958, which translates as Russian idiots go home. Absolutely right. Last night, once again, Ukrainian drones attacked the Novokuybishevsk oil refinery. And I have a question. I know, we've just launched an English language channel, by the way, and it's actually started to grow and develop on its own quite well. It's a brand new channel, literally just a couple of weeks old, but it's taking off, and that's encouraging. And I have this question. Do you remember the Biden administration has emphasized several times that it's not allowed to strike Russian oil refineries? That somehow something would be affected and there would be terrible, terrible consequences. Now we see that not only is it possible to strike Russian oil refineries, but it's necessary to do so. It's also possible to strike the main oil pipeline and even impose sanctions, as Donald Trump demonstrated, for example, against those who buy Russian oil. Maybe some American journalist could, at some point, ask a representative of the former Joseph Biden administration what guided their decision when they strongly advised Ukraine not to strike Russian oil refineries. I think many people would be glad to hear the answer to that question, all the more so since we recently launched a channel. Maybe someone will come into the comments and say, maybe this question has already been asked to Mr. Biden. By the way, friends, I have a small request for you here. That is, some of you are definitely watching me right now, not on my official channels, either the main one or the English language one. Various channels upload my videos to their own platforms. I don't mind because it helps increase the reach of fundraising for our defenders, for our warriors, but I still recommend that you subscribe to the official channels as well, because the comments you write there, I can at least see them and have the opportunity to respond. It's actually very easy to do. Very easy. As a rule, the channels that show my videos include a link to my official channel, either in the description of this video or in the first comment. So I would really appreciate it if you also subscribed to the official channels using these links. Russian propagandists are having a real meltdown because the president of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, spoke a harsh truth. Harsh for them that Azerbaijan's incorporation into the USSR was an occupation. By the way, people from Azerbaijan have written to me saying that this is exactly how it's described in their textbooks. So this isn't some new claim, it's well-known, widely understood information. And the president of Azerbaijan stated that the Azerbaijan Democratic Republic, which emerged in 1918, ceased to exist as a result of occupation by Russian forces. And I'll add that it wasn't just Azerbaijan. Absolutely all the republics of the former USSR were forcibly annexed, dragged into the Soviet Union. Add to that the countries of the Warsaw Pact, and you'll understand the scale of this occupation. So no one joined the USSR voluntarily. They used the same methods back then as Putin is using today. Back then, the USSR would send in troops at the request of some so-called workers. Now Putin is doing the same thing, supposedly at the request of Russian speakers. The scheme is the same. They gather a group of fringe individuals who ask for troops to be sent in on their behalf. Back then it was the USSR, now it's Putin. And that's it. By the way, I always use Soviet films as an example. Soviet films. Those who, like me, are from the Mesozoic era still remember these Soviet films. They are perceived completely differently now. Remember, there was a film that Soviet nostalgists practically worship. They say it's just a wonderful film. It was called Officers. And there's a line in it. There is such a profession, to defend the motherland. That very line. The main character's commander says this line to him when they arrive somewhere in what is now Turkmenistan to fight the villainous Basmachi. You remember, right? The Basmachi, they were portrayed as really bad people, those who were against Soviet power. What were you doing in Turkmenistan? What homeland were you defending there? The same applies to Russian soldiers. How are you defending your homeland in Ukraine? Who even attacked you? I mean, they're acting according to exactly the same template. And of course, they're not defending their homeland in Ukraine. They're doing it for money too. Back then, at least there was some kind of patriotism, for the motherland and all that. But now it's just for money. You won't find a single Russian occupier now who would go into a trench for free for some kind of ideals. There are none like that. Everyone does it for money. And they're not defending their homeland but Putin's Botoxed ass. And they're trying to somehow pull him out of this disastrous, shameful war to save what normal people would call his face. Putin clearly picked the wrong fight. Let me show you a video now. From Kiev, this is after last night's shelling. This video perfectly and powerfully illustrates who the Ukrainian people truly are. Take a look. The windows are blown out, the balconies are destroyed, but the barbershop keeps working. You have to work, you have to earn, you have to live, you have to fight. That's what Ukrainians are all about. And now our segment, Who Let the Internet into the Ward? I'm going to show you the kind of content that's filling various regional and federal channels. There's an aggressive campaign underway to cement the cult of personality around Putin. Now, take a look at this video.
America, we are certainly not afraid of you. Russia is indeed a very strong power, and we are incredibly proud of this fact. Russia is a truly formidable power, and we absolutely do not need any other nation or entity. With Putin, we live as if behind a very strong and impenetrable stone wall. Foreigners, gentlemen, why are you persistently trying to bite and attack us? We've got incredibly solid armor and sharp, formidable teeth. You certainly get it. The Germans try to scare us with tigers and leopards. They're crawling toward us. But we have reliable protection. You'll get such a beating and will only become stronger. Let there be hardships, even if there are significant challenges. We are a hard-working and resilient people indeed. We won't be left with nothing. Putin is our brains. Putin is our hero. He cares deeply for everyone. He's truly our father.
Putin is our father. Basically, nothing new. Just like Soviet propaganda once labeled Stalin as the father of the people. Well, here, most likely, old man Kabayev is no longer the father of the nation, but the grandfather of the nation. But here, I guess, we need to copy from the Lenin era, because there were poems about Grandpa Lenin. Many people probably learned them in school back in the Mesozoic era. In fact, they made you memorize those poems almost from kindergarten. At a time when you still couldn't perceive things critically, they just hammer this quote into your head. Well, Putin has a simpler task now, or rather his strategists do. You just take a poem about Lenin or Stalin and replace the word Lenin with Putin. For example, I took some old poems about Lenin and swapped Lenin for Putin. We always remember Putin and think about him. We consider his birthday the best day. We prepare to serve our motherland in a Putin-like way, to work, to love in a Putin-like way, and to value friendship. That's it. You don't need to do anything else. Just swap Lenin for Putin and off you go. Or here's another one. The kind and gentle grandfather. Putin looks at us from his portrait. How we draw, how we play, how good we feel right now. Well, I mean, it's just ridiculous, right? By the way, you could also take poems about Stalin and just replace Stalin with Putin, and it would be a classic. For example, I took a poem from when opportunistic poets wrote odes to Stalin. It's called the poem His Portrait. Comrade, let's walk across Soviet land, let's look into apartments, the Union Committee, the village council, the school, the cinema, In the children's sanatorium, everywhere we go, we see that familiar portrait. In distant winter quarters covered with snow, in the bright palaces of the Academy of Sciences, everywhere he is visibly present with us, the leader and teacher, comrade and friend. So let millions of people look with love at his millions of portraits. He is worthy of the people's love. He is our first and best deputy. He made our motherland unbreakable. He is the creator of our constitution. Great and close, dear and beloved. Putin is a teacher, friend, and father. Well, isn't this modern Russia? So what do you think? Why invent tyrants whom Putin admired, attributing to them the creation of Ukraine, Lenin and Stalin? His entourage did all the work for him. But here's another poem, a short one, and it's very characteristic of modern Russia as well, if you replace Stalin with Putin. In the heat of battle, when the soldiers stood at a fiery and difficult line, they would say the word Putin, and it would ease their hearts. Whether at the front line or deep in the rear, the latest news was broadcast everywhere over the radio. Putin was with us, the country, and he was everywhere with us. His greatness grew 100-fold. He became our guiding star, our guiding star. He has been awarded the love of the entire nation, the most wonderful, the most precious of all rewards. Well, it's that old lady. Well, it's her. It's all for them, you see? A poem from 1945. I guarantee you that in a short time, when Russia bans the hated messengers and information resources where at least a little truth still remains, all of this will be banned and everything will be fully controlled through the state messenger Max. It's simple. The Russian information space will be filled with poems like these. Right now, maybe some of those people who aren't interested in politics, sitting there with their lavender Raf coffee, will laugh at this, but later they'll be the ones reading it. They won't understand why, but they'll do it. And then just like in North Korea, the best pastime in Russia will be a day off when the whole family can go visit a monument to bow to Putin, to him. Well, and those who don't go to the monument can be shot a little. Enemies of the people must be destroyed, as the great Lenin bequeathed. Take care of yourselves, friends, and take care of your loved ones. Subscribe to this channel. And I ask you to support the fundraiser for our warriors, for our heroes. Wishing us all a peaceful day and, of course, glory to Ukraine.